Take a deep breath with me for a second. Just kind of settle in. Now, I want you to think about this heavy, almost exhausting pressure that we all feel today. You know the one. It's that constant, nagging pressure to curate a perfectly unique life. I mean, think about the hours we spend agonizing over the exact right filter for a photo, or the highly specific mid-century modern layout of our living room, or finding that incredibly niche indie band that we can firmly attach our identity to. We are just exhausted. Exhausted by the relentless demand to be an individual. We carry this immense weight around, truly believing that every single purchase we make is like a brick in the grand monument of our unique, one-of-a-kind identity. But in this explainer, we're going to slow things way down. We are going to pull back the curtain and look really closely at a deeply unsettling idea from the philosophy of Jean Baudrillard. We're going to explore the very real possibility that the customized, highly personalized life you are working so incredibly hard to build, well, it isn't actually yours at all.
Okay, let's dive into this because this is exactly where things get deeply uncomfortable, but absolutely fascinating. Are your choices really yours? We have this deeply held, super comfortable belief that the customized products we buy, the bespoke leather boots, the incredibly specific artisanal oat milk coffee order, the exact shade of matte paint on our smartphone, we think these are authentic expressions of our true inner selves. We genuinely believe these objects project our unique, singular soul out into the world. But Baudrillard comes along and argues that we are completely, fundamentally mistaken. We think we're out here making these independent, highly personal choices, but we're actually just responding to a pre-programmed language of consumption. We aren't creating ourselves from scratch. We are literally just checking boxes on an invisible, massive industrial menu.
To really wrap our heads around this, consider a classic, almost painfully perfect example that Baudrillard highlights, a vintage Mercedes-Benz advertisement. The ad confidently, proudly declares that you can perfectly satisfy the tastes and desires of your personality by choosing from 76 color styles and 697 interior decors. I just want to let that sink in for a moment. Think about the audacity of that claim. The system is explicitly training us to search for our deepest, most profound personality inside a massive, completely pre-programmed menu of industrial options. It tells us, right to our faces, that our unique soul can be mathematically calculated through a specific combination of leather trim and hubcaps. We are taught that finding your personality isn't about deep introspection. It's simply about combining the right standardized variables provided to you by a global megacorporation. Now let's contrast that high-end luxury car with a simple, everyday hair dye advertisement. The ad says, "This Recital blonde has not changed me. I am more than ever myself." It captures the exact same logic, just at a vastly different price point. And it perfectly demonstrates the illogical, almost magical belief we've all been conditioned to accept without questioning. The idea that consuming a mass-produced, factory chemical product can somehow magically make you more yourself. I mean, logically, how can buying something absolutely identical to what millions of other people are buying reveal your absolute singularity? It's a profound paradox, right? We are desperately using mass-produced signs to try and signal a totally unique existence. So there is a stark, clear-eyed line we need to draw here between what we think we are doing and what is actually happening. On the one hand, we have genuine, authentic human difference. Real individuality is messy. It's totally singular. It is rooted in real-world conflict, in our actual lived experiences, our painful contradictions, and our personal flaws. But on the other hand, we have what the consumer society offers us instead, which is industrial personalization. This version, it's safe, it is prepackaged, it is completely monopolized by industrial forces. It doesn't actually challenge anything about the world or ourselves. It merely allows us to pick a slightly different flavor of the exact same conformity. Without even realizing it, we have traded the complex, messy reality of being a distinct human being for the safe, sterile, incredibly boring comfort of a personalized consumer profile.
And this leads us to a rather haunting, almost ghost-like concept that Baudrillard explores, the absent person. The idea here is that the real, authentic person, the subject with an indestructible will, deep, unpredictable passions, and true character, has effectively been swept out of our highly functional modern universe. In its place is an empty shell, an absent person that desperately, frantically tries to reconstitute itself in the abstract by clinging to signs, logos, brands, and aesthetics. Because the true self has been kind of erased by the massive homogenization of modern life, we feel entirely hollow inside. And so what do? We furiously try to fill that void by dressing ourselves up in this intricate, artificial armor of personalized consumer choices. We're trying to buy a self.
So the crucial point is the concept of the smallest marginal difference, or SMD. Honestly, if you take one thing away from this explainer, let it be this. This is the absolute core of Baudrillard's theory. Let's really spend a moment absorbing this. We don't differentiate ourselves through grand, heroic actions or radical philosophies anymore. We differentiate ourselves through microscopic, industrially produced variations. We're talking about a slightly different shade of foundation makeup, a marginally different woodsy scent of a designer perfume, a phone with a titanium edge instead of an aluminum one. We fiercely use these tiny marginal differences to falsely claim absolute individuality and to elevate our social status. But the tragic irony, the real gut punch here, is that these microscopic shifts are engineered on a massive, global, industrial scale. We are literally trapped in a factory of tiny differences, convinced that we're the ones running the machinery. Let's walk through these specific, highly cinematic metaphors straight from the text to see how this plays out in our real lives. Imagine smoking a Kent cigarette because you want to look like a sophisticated artist, versus smoking a Marlboro to project the image of a rugged, untamed individualist. Or picture the guy driving a vintage Alfa Romeo, making sure it's perfectly paired with a highly specific niche cologne like green water. Or even the person who refuses to use normal everyday charcoal and instead insists on buying barbecue charcoal infused with herbes et Provence. These feel like intense, deeply personal lifestyle choices, don't they? But actually, scratch that. They aren't personal at all. They are meticulously calculated combinations of niche products. When you combine them, you aren't expressing some wild, untamed soul. You are actually just playing by the strict rules of a highly rigorous, invisible social code. It's like a giant puzzle. You are simply reading the menu of uniqueness and ordering the combination that signals the exact social standing you want everyone to see. Let's move to and see how this builds into what we can only really call the industrial trap. It works in 3 brutal steps. First, the industrial monopoly comes in and completely abolishes real human differences by standardizing our lives, our work, and our production. Everything becomes uniform. Second, to keep the economic system running, it produces artificially diversified models, thousands of tiny, meaningless variations of the exact same basic goods. And finally, the masterstroke, it takes those artificial differences and sells them back to us as personalization. Think about how wild that is. The very system that erased your genuine uniqueness mass produces the illusion of uniqueness and then has the nerve to sell it back to you at a premium price. You are literally buying the cure from the exact same entity that gave you the disease in the first place. Consider this incredibly harsh, deeply counterintuitive truth from Baudrillard. To differentiate oneself is precisely to affiliate to a model and therefore to relinquish any real difference. This is the great, inescapable paradox of the consumer society. The harder you try to consume your way to uniqueness, the more niche the brand you find, the more obscure the product, the more wildly customized the order, the deeper you actually fall into standard industrial conformity. Because every single time you make one of these choices, you are simply aligning yourself with a pre-existing category. You're slotting yourself into a pre-existing model created by a marketing department. In trying so desperately to prove you are different, you actually prove just how entirely compliant you are to the code. Now, what's really fascinating here is how this completely exposes the myth of consumer democracy. On the surface, we are constantly told we live in this golden era of equality because, hey, everyone can buy the same paperback book, the same smartphone, or the same flat-screen TV. It feels wonderfully democratic. But underneath that shiny surface, we see the grim reality. These tiny, marginal differences in consumption, the SMDs we talked about, they actually act as a hidden, incredibly effective mechanism for intense social segregation. Real luxury today isn't just about owning a TV anymore. It's about subtle, almost invisible codes. It's about having access to clean air, silent living spaces, highly nuanced aesthetic tastes, and knowing the correct way to consume. The system uses these tiny, curated differences to maintain rigid, invisible social hierarchies, all while pretending we are all perfectly equal. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute peak of this psychological manipulation. Consider this actual advertising slogan that Baudrillard dissects. The body you dream of is your own. I mean, wow, it is a stunning paradox, an absolute tautology. It is literally telling you to dream of being exactly who you already are. But of course, there's a catch. To unlock this true self, you must buy their highly specific, branded product. It shows how our deep narcissism, our natural desire to love and indulge ourselves, is actively being hijacked. We think we are finally practicing self-care, finally putting ourselves first, But our narcissism is just a desperate, heavily managed attempt to match a collective industrially imposed model of beauty or success. We are quite literally loving ourselves right into the very hands of the system.
And the psychological toll this takes on us, it is immense. This is exactly why the modern middle class feels so perpetually drained, so constantly burned out. We are suffering from endemic social anxiety because we are forced every single day to read and decode the complex signs of what everyone else is consuming. It is an exhausting, completely invisible competition where the rules are always shifting under our feet. It breeds perpetual dissatisfaction because the system is perfectly designed to ensure that the exact moment you achieve the perfect combination of items to express yourself, the code changes, and suddenly you're inadequate once again. We are totally paralyzed by the illusion of choice, burning all our vital energy just picking out signs from a massive catalog, completely oblivious to the fact that we never chose the catalog to begin with.
But listen, there is a way out of this exhaustion, and it begins right here, with seeing the strings. Once you truly understand the smallest marginal difference, once you see that industrial personalization is nothing but a carefully constructed, rigged game, you experience this massive, incredibly liberating realization. You realize, deep down, that you do not have to base your identity on the microscopic variations of mass-produced goods. By finally seeing the industrial code for what it actually is, a giant machine designed solely to produce endless difference and endless anxiety, you are freed. You are freed from the agonizing daily pressure to buy your way into a unique identity. You can finally step off the treadmill. Which brings us to the final lingering question of this explainer. And it's a big one. If your tastes, your deeply held preferences, and your carefully curated aesthetics are fundamentally just an industrial code, who are you when you stop buying? It's a profound, terrifying, and ultimately beautiful question. When the brands fall away, when the signs disappear, when the smallest marginal differences no longer define every waking moment of your life, what actually remains? I'll leave you to think deeply about that.